Hib. I think Hib is the one that turned me so, I guess it was like the polio vaccine with the older nurses, or the measles vaccine when I talked to the older nurses, but Hib, here it was, we had no cure, we had no prevention, we knew the causative organism, but we couldn't stop the spread. Now we have complete and total prevention and almost entirely wiped out that disease in my own lifetime. Since 1990, it's like 20 years, it's gone. I just sit back and think it's a miracle. And to do a spinal tap on a tiny baby that's 2 months old, you had to take them in your hands and kind of hold them like this while a doctor put the needle in the back so that you could get the spinal fluid, so that if you could see if they had spinal meningitis. We would do sometimes 3 and 4 of these a night, and they were called the septic workup. And the nurses got so, they just couldn't do more than 1 or 2 a night because it was so gut-wrenching to have to take this baby away from the mother and then return the baby back with pole and an IV and little marks where you had tried to put the IV in. And you know, you really had to, because if you didn't treat them, if it was meningitis and you didn't treat it, then the baby would have horrible side effects too. And I was so struck about probably maybe 10 years ago, there were no treatment rooms anymore. And it was because they said, well, you know, we hardly ever do any spinal taps anymore. The Hib vaccine changed it all. They brought the baby in, and because he had a fever and he wasn't acting right, and he went to the desk that you come into the emergency room, and the nurse from the desk walked the child right over, and I happened to be in charge that night, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and she just went. And what this child had was something called epiglottitis. And so the epiglottis in their neck is swelling inside from this bacterial infection. This is caused by Hib, by H. flu meningitis. And I just remember walking upstairs with the parent, and we had to walk from this room through the hallway and up an elevator to the OR. And we closed all the doors in the hallway, and we got everybody out of the hallway, and everybody was walking around like this, because you didn't want anything to scare or startle the child, because an 18-month-old who's not feeling good will just start crying. And if he started crying, he would have obstructed his airway, and he could have either had a horrible emergency tracheostomy, or he could have had, if it wasn't recognized, he would die. And that was Hib. It's a bacterial organism. It's still in the environment or wherever it lurks. And so if you stopped vaccinating all the children in the U.S. today, probably within 5 years you would start to see young babies again with Hib meningitis.